my blanket. So nice and comfy. Got my tea. Always. It's time for something completely different, but not really. More like Divergent. I don't know if this is a bad idea because, let's put it this way, I think that the people who need to see this are probably not going to mind that I talk like this, or that I'm not like super hype masking in order to gain a bunch of views. So the reason why I wanted to make this is because the process of finding out that I'm autistic and ADHD has been like a year and a half. And a lot of that time, the number one thing I see from people is they're figuring it out. They don't know if they are. They want to know how I got a diagnosis. They want to know, how did you figure this out? So I thought I would sit and have some tea and chat with you because, quite frankly, I'm not doing great right now. I mean, is anyone... The process of finding out about all of this is not easy. It's not guaranteed. It's not necessarily going to get you anything. So I thought I would discuss all of that and more. So this is going to be my story, and I'm going to try my best to provide more intersectional information as well about this, because right off the bat, we should just talk about it. Getting a diagnosis is a privilege for white males. Getting a diagnosis, even as a female, is a white privilege. Or as a woman, or as a person with a uterus, is a white privilege. And I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that for some people, there is no diagnosis, there is no relevance for that, because what is it going to even get you? How are you going to get help when other intersections and marginalizations already make it so that people are not going to help you, provide you with support, etc.? And I have learned this information from many different people. I have been trying my best to educate myself on the various different ways that people are impacted by this. My experiences are going to be different from everyone else. My experience is going to be different because we had the money to pay for an evaluation. My experience is going to be different because I'm white. And it's important to realize that even though things are hard for me, even though they feel tough right now, it's tough all over, as they say, there are still ways that I benefit. And still ways that we are failing to support people who need this kind of help. Because just because it isn't relevant doesn't mean that it isn't necessary. Just because there's some other intersection or marginalization that's making things tough doesn't mean that's okay. It doesn't mean that they don't also need to be validated, that they also need that information, that they also need the help and the support. And unfortunately, we live in a society where even if you're white, there doesn't seem to be a lot of support or help built into the systems. And I'm talking about every kind, every single way that this society is built, every structure, school, doctors, medicine, jobs, relationships, being a parent. When I search for hey, how can you help me? How do I get support? How on earth do I navigate all of this? You will not see articles about that. You won't. And I've looked. Do not search Google. You will get a ton of articles that basically are geared towards people who are not us, who are either caregivers or partners or doctors, explaining their opinions about us. And I say us, I can only say us as a white person with a uterus. And I gotta be careful not to use the word us, And I'm trying not to, because the experience of being autistic is as diverse as people are. So it isn't fair for me to sit here and say us. Like, I understand every experience that every person's going through. But for me, it was very disappointing to find that most articles are geared towards how hard it is to deal with us. Tips for people who are trying to put up with us, and like zero articles about how we can actually manage. Okay, so my long spiel about that's called ableism. It's everywhere. I started this journey about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, when a friend of mine who had been, reading my posts on Facebook, my rants on Facebook, reached out to me and was like, I think you might be autistic. I have been reading articles that show that people with uteruses, people who identify as women, or people who occupy the space of women are often not diagnosed because the diagnosis criteria is mostly geared towards boys, white boys. And, obviously we have progressed into understanding that there is not just a gender-based version of autism and its presentation, but the whole point of it was you could be autistic, you're just not presenting in the very stereotypical way that society has decided is a yes or a no. Yes, so there's a much broader definition than anybody who's actually handing out these diagnoses has been trained to recognize. And that doesn't mean that they haven't. I was lucky enough to work with someone who did. And that's the only reason, honestly, that I got a diagnosis. But the first thing that I did off the bat when I started to think maybe I was I did a ton of research. And I not only did a ton of research, but I sought out the perspectives of actually autistic people. And this is so important. You want to know what it's actually like from the inside. That's important. And for some weird reason, especially in the autism realm, that doesn't seem to be valid. I don't know why. It's very odd. Ableism. Like, we're not viewed as full humans. And if you want some proof of that, like, you can definitely find that. All this stuff around needing to cure our brains, like it's some kind of tragedy. All this stuff around looking up the genetics and trying to find the genetics so that, we could potentially eliminate the genes and, oh my gosh, our lives would be so much better, which is kind of laughable. It's actually really laughable. It's actually eugenics. I just have such a hard time talking about this, honestly, because I know I'm going to get the hate. Anytime an autistic person actually starts to try to voice their opinion about what they experience, there's 5 other people storming in to say, that's not true. No, it's not. And I'm not sure what that's about either. Clearly, we experience this. I experience this. I should actually know something about it. And on top of that, there's so many ways that people deny our experiences. As someone who was just diagnosed and I'm almost 40, I mean, you've got people who think that, oh, well, you just got your diagnosis, so you're now autistic. It's like, no, I've been experiencing this my entire life and wondering what the heck is going on, and everyone's just telling me to, stop it. And then you also get parents, well-meaning parents, albeit, but parents who think that they know better than you. I've had people tell me that I don't know anything about raising an autistic child, and yet at the same time, I am autistic, I am ADHD, and I have 2 children, and I have been, as far as I know, raising them, and they are neurodivergent. So yeah, it's just this odd thing where we are just not supposed to be allowed to be experts on our own selves, which I find really weird. After my friend told me that, I started to think to myself, No, that can't be me. And that was internalized ableism. I will point blank tell you that. It was internalized ableism because I had some idea in my head. I didn't even know. I didn't have any idea in my head of what autism actually is, because we don't actually focus on that. We really don't. We focus on what you see when someone's in distress. We focus on the parts that are easy for neurotypical people or autistic people to notice, but we do not actually focus on what the actual experience is from the perspective of an autistic person. So because of that, I needed to go find people who were actually autistic so I could better understand what the actual experience is. And what I found really interesting about all of it was that all of these things that people said that autistic people do gave me this very actually inaccurate idea of what I was doing versus what that definition was, because it turns out they were the same thing. And once again, that's because we have very particular, set, almost superficial, two-dimensional ideas of how this works, how we work, how I work, how autistic people work. And so it was almost mind-blowing to start to learn from actually autistic people. Lots of people on TikTok, lots of articles, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere I could look, videos on YouTube that would talk about what the experience was actually like. And if I had gone into some assessment before knowing any of this, they would have asked me all of these questions and I would have said, oh, no, I don't do that. But what I found from being patient and doing the work and really thinking about it and really listening to people is that over a year, I started to have all of these flashbacks. I started to have all of these like moments where I would get chills. Sometimes I would get like shaky and cold, where I would just be like, oh my gosh, that's what was happening. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So once I started to really identify, once I really started to say, yep, this is, I'm pretty sure this is what I am, I went and I found a neurodivergent support therapist. They exist. There's not a lot of them. And I will tell you the reason why, and it's really sad. Like I said, the research is not actually written by autistic people. The research is written by holistic neurotypical people who do not really fully understand the experience. And actually a lot of things that have been written in the research, a lot of the research itself that has been conducted is inhumane. It's ableist. It's really hard to take if you are a neurodivergent person, if you are an autistic person who is trying to, get your degree so that you can be a therapist or so that you can assess people or whatever. It's hard. It's hard to sit there in class and listen to people talk about you like you're subhuman. So anyone who actually goes through that process and sticks with it and is not like severely traumatized or triggered on the regular is, thank goodness. And we need more. We need more neurodivergent people. We need more neurodivergent and autistic people in every single place, because the way we work sometimes is just so hugely misunderstood and so stigmatized that we really do need way more people in our corner. So finding a neurodivergent therapist, finding an actually autistic therapist was the most life-changing thing ever. And again, it was a privilege. It was a privilege to have the money to pay for that, and the privilege to be able to find someone who, it didn't matter if they were out of network or not. It's just a fact. But I did find her, and we talked a lot about all of my experiences. And for a little while there, I was constantly doubting myself and thinking, well, maybe it's just trauma. But every single autistic person has trauma. Seriously, there's not a single autistic person that this world has created that does not experience trauma. And that is because of the way everything is built, the way everyone treats us, and the way our families treat us, and the things they expect from us that we actually we can't always do, but we're expected to push through and do them anyway. It's kind of sad. It's actually really sad. So after a little while, I started to realize that I kind of really needed to have an answer, but I wasn't sure if I needed an answer, and I didn't know if I was ever going to get an answer. And part of that is because there are so many stories from other neurodivergent people, from other autistic people, where they went into an assessment and the person was like, oh, well, you're making eye contact with me, so you can't possibly be autistic. Look at me. I'm staring right at you right now. I can look at people. Do I want to be looking at people constantly? No. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Is it a lot of work? Yes. But can I do it? Of course. The process of getting assist is so vastly different based upon the person, the practitioner. And it's also going to come out very differently, like I said, based upon how much you actually have listened to other autistic people, how much you've researched, and how much you really actually understand the criteria. And that's a lot. I mean, let's just think a second about the amount of labor and the amount of chance that goes into whether or not someone validates your experiences or not. And I also think it's really funny because, there's jokes about like, well, if you made a full binder and you brought it to the assessment, you're probably autistic, because we do really like doing all of the research. I'm not a binder person. I don't have it all printed out, but I have spent so much time obsessively talking about this and getting excited about it and like processing it and just thinking that it's all so interesting. For some reason, there's people also in the world who think that if you go and you watch a TikTok video and you self-diagnose, that that's just the worst thing ever, and how dare you, and that's wrong. And the fact of the matter is, the chances of someone actually giving you a diagnosis, like, there's so many hoops you have to jump through in order to get there, and not everyone can, which is why in the autistic community, especially, autistic people accept self-diagnosis. Because a lot of us, and including me, like for a while there, I was like, do I really want to get an assessment? Do I really want to sit there and make this about proving to someone what my brain is like, instead of just accepting what my brain is like? Do I really need someone who isn't me, who hasn't had my experiences, deeming if this is correct or not? And I really thought about it for a long time. My therapist suggested someone, and they were like, look, this person tends to be more sensitive to the various ways that this presents in more than just white boys. And I was like, that sounds great, but at the same time, do I really need this? Eventually, it finally just got to the day and I hadn't canceled because I just couldn't call and I didn't think about it and I didn't know. And I was like, whatever, I guess we're doing this. But by that point, I had become confident enough in who I was and the fact that I was, that even if the person had said no, I was gonna be okay with that. I was gonna be okay with saying, that's your opinion. And I also told myself, I actually wrote on a little piece of paper, it said, this doesn't matter. Just so that the whole time I wasn't super nervous and like super worried about making sure that I explained everything perfectly, because that's way too much pressure. We put way too much pressure on people. And again, that was a privilege. It was a privilege to not have everything riding on getting an autistic diagnosis. And I was just like, whatever it is, it is. And, I'm not really the kind of person who's going to qualify for disability anyway. So, this is just someone saying you're right. When I got my diagnosis, I was kind of blown away because I had not really thought that I was also ADHD. but apparently I'm inattentive type ADHD, but does explain how both diagnoses actually tend to mask each other at times. I remember just feeling this like amazing surge of like happiness and relief, and like this really is something that I am, and honestly just feeling happy because instead of wondering if I needed support, instead of constantly wondering if I really need to stim, instead of questioning constantly if like it's all in my head and I don't actually need anything, I could just say, yep, you do, and you can just do it. And actually, that's what the therapist said. They were like, now you don't have to worry about like convincing anyone. You don't have to worry about anything else besides just doing what helps you. And that's all well and good until you start to realize that you are in a society that really doesn't have very much to help you. And that's where I'm at now. I feel like I had that high of like, yes, I'm correct. And then realizing there's not really a lot I can do about this, or that other people can do for me. And it's not because they shouldn't or they can't. It is because they won't. So that's honestly been a really tough thing to handle. And that's where I'm at right now, as well as trying my best to understand how this gets so much harder with intersections, how this gets so much harder when, you know, it doesn't really matter if you tell people you're disabled or not. And also wrestling with this concept that, I mean, I can understand why people don't like the idea of calling being autistic and ADHD disabled. However, from my perspective, it's made it harder for me to have a community. So I don't have friends. Not having friends locally, not having people to hang out and support you all the time is debilitating. My partner cannot be everything for me all the time, and it's very lonely. And we have studies that show that loneliness is definitely linked to health issues. Being autistic makes you also way more likely to unalive yourself. It makes you more likely to have heart issues. There's a few other things that it makes you more likely to have. We deal with more stress. We're more likely and almost always have anxiety and depression. Our quality of life is harder because of this, not because of how we are. I mean, more so because of how the world stigmatizes us and doesn't seem to want to change things even the slightest little bit to make things easier for us so we're not as stressed and not as depressed and not as anxious. And on top of it, those of us who have masked our whole lives because we are told that we're just being overly sensitive, that we're being dramatic, that we're just trying to start something when we're honestly just feeling everything so largely. Like right now my clothes smell like detergent because we forgot to buy hypoallergenic. Am I going to smell it the whole day? Yes. Is it giving me a headache? Yes. This whole concept that people who feel things more strongly are somehow exaggerating. So that's my story. I don't have a big bow to wrap it up in. I don't have the experiences that other people have had. It's really not okay to assume that your experiences speak for everyone, especially if you're white. So don't do that anymore, please. I'm just at a weird place, and it's making it hard to make things. It's making it hard to convince the people that I love in my life all the time that what I'm going through is real, that what I'm experiencing needs some assistance. And I've just been really trying to come to terms with the fact that even though I feel like I struggle, there are still ways that I benefit. And also, like, how the heck do we support the people who can't even get a diagnosis, who there is no point to getting a diagnosis, who are not just uncomfortable and depressed and sad and rejected, but are also in danger? This is something that we really should be focusing more on, and those stories are the ones we should be hearing more. So, I hope this is helpful to anyone who is self-diagnosed, wondering if they should get a diagnosis. Once you get one, I got a letter that said, if you ever work, you can give this to your employer, and it had a list of things that I would require to work there, like headphones, breaks, having things written down, all my instructions written down, so that I was very clear about what was expected of me. I'm not really going to go into all of the actual diagnostic criteria. That's really long. But I will say that the one thing that's come out of this is that I now have an explanation, and I now feel like I have the permission to stand up for myself and take care of myself in the ways that I need to. I'm not sure how much it's going to get me in terms of other people being understanding. I don't know how much it's really going to get me in terms of support from other people. But at least now I'm not constantly trying to fix myself. And if you have a neurodivergent or potentially autistic person who wants to feel that kind of validation, wants to hear from someone else who's autistic, maybe send this along their way. I think sometimes we just want to know that there are other people that exist in the world who experience the world the way we do. We're told so often that our experience is like ridiculous or not real, or that no one else feels that way, when in reality there's a whole bunch of us who do, and we don't talk to each other enough because oftentimes we're trying to hide it from everyone else, and so we hide it from each other too. That's why I'm so glad to be here on this platform and to be able to share my experiences. I do really very much care so much about people feeling, whether they can tell people or not, whether they can get a diagnosis or not, that they are valid. You have worth, that you deserve to be here. And not only that, but you deserve to be here as your whole self without having to change everything about you to make everyone more comfortable. I look forward to finding out how I can better serve myself, because at the moment, that's pretty much all I have. Hopefully, people who are not neurodivergent or not autistic, as people who dominate and have more power, they should be the ones to do the work of making sure that we don't have to feel like rejects of society, that we actually do have actual needs in the spaces, every space, and that we shouldn't have to hide. Take care, salty possums. Seriously, just stim. Just stim. Do something for yourself. That's all we got right now. Bye.